we were in negotiations.
Investing in real estate, they're winning, they're making money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you can build on. I am your host, Kevin Amos. This podcast is a little bit different than maybe some of the others that you have heard, and we are having so much fun with this because we're helping real estate investors and real estate educators. So if you're an investor or you're providing content to investors, this is the podcast for you. I have a super fun special guest with me today, Mr. Clint Harris. I'm excited to get to know Clint a little bit more today, because I know his story is vast. He's got lots of experience in different asset classes. He's a professional real estate investor, an entrepreneur. He raises capital for Nomad Capital.
Yep.
Also does the investor relations, and he also owns Going Coastal Property Management Company. And I read in your bio, your longer bio that you sent over, that was out of like a pain point, and you ended up starting your property management company. So let's get into it, man. How is it going, Clint?
It's great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, like most of things in my career, it came from one of many pain points. But yeah, it's going great, man. Life is exciting. Every day is a little bit different. I started life as a full-time real estate investor in 2022. So it's good, man. Life is great.
So it's still rather new to you, even though you've got lots of experience in different classes here. I know you got started, or you had a career in medical sales, right? And then you, I guess, got burned out on that because lots of weekends and evenings and just an absolute grind.
Yeah, you nailed it. In fact, it was kind of like before I got burned out, I just saw that it was probably going to happen at some point. I spent 16 years implanting pacemakers and defibrillators. So I worked in cardiology and I loved it. And I was blessed to be pretty good at it. I was a sales rep in surgery. And as you can imagine, heart problems are not exactly 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So lots of nights, lots of weekends, lots of being on call, driving up to a couple hours away at 2 or 3 in the morning. And it's kind of a young man's game. And just the anticipation of, it's something that a lot of people, it just wears you down. So, I loved it, but I knew that there was probably going to come a time when I didn't. And that's not the time that you start worrying about it. You don't wait for it to start raining before you start building Noah's Ark, right? So I was thinking ahead, and in my early mid 20s, in the effort of eventually creating an off-ramp from that lifestyle, I started investing in real estate. First in single family homes, did a couple flips. My first property was a duplex and a house hack, which I'd never heard that term. I thought I invented it at the time. I was a genius, 24 years old.
I invented that, Clint.
Yeah, I know, right? And then I was a sales rep in Columbia, South Carolina for 11 years. Eventually, my wife and I took a promotion. I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina in 2017, which is a beach community. And it's the first time we were in an area which gave us the opportunity to start exploring short-term rentals. Kind of went back to my roots. We bought a duplex 2 blocks off the water at the beach, 3-bed, 2-bath on each side. We started living in one. We did Airbnb out of the other, did 60 grand the first summer. And we're like, oh man, this is real. Still implanting pacemakers and defibrillators, but we started buying small multifamily properties and converting them to Airbnb properties. So still have 3 quadplexes and a duplex. We moved out of that duplex and built a house, but we still have 14 Airbnb units. And then I got to the point of wanting to turn that over to a property management company. And I couldn't find anybody who said that they could get the numbers that we were getting, because nobody's going to mind your business like you mind your business.
Right.
Any property is only as good as the person operating it. I'm not the best operator in the world, but when they're my properties and I'm running them differently than someone that's running a portfolio of 300 or 400 properties, it's hard to get their attention to detail on my properties the way that I would give it. So that turned into frustration with not being able to find a company, turned into building a company from the ground up with some incredible operating partners. It looks very, very passive. If you look at it, you're like, oh man, Clint's getting checks. The reality is it's residual. It's not passive. I spent 2 years front loading the work on that. Now that company manages my properties and about 80 other properties, has a cleaning company, linen facility, all that, which was great. And I kind of messed that up because I was still doing medical sales at the time. I replaced my income with what I was doing with medical sales, and I achieved a level of financial independence, which is cool, right?
That's very fast, man. Great job.
It didn't feel like it at the time, but yeah, in retrospect, because of the power of multifamily, I was buying one property, but it was 4 units at a time.
Right.
So it escalated fairly quickly. The mistake that I made is that even though I reached a level of financial independence, what I did not get was time and location independence. Because even when I wasn't working, I was still basically on call because I had my phone on me. I was managing my properties, then managing a company. And it took me a few years to get out of that role. But with Airbnb, you don't have one tenant per unit per month. You have 8 to 10 tenants. And you got 14 properties, and then managing another, at the time, 40 or 50 more with partners. I realized, like, oh, I did this completely wrong in terms of I achieved the financial goal, but at what cost, right? At the cost of location and time independence. And what I realized at the time is that the FI movement, that financial independence, in my opinion, is a very shallow goal. When what we're all really after, if we want to break it down, is financial, time, and location independence. Because those 3 things together give you an independence of purpose. And an independence of purpose is when you go where you want, when you want, you do what you want, you decide what's important to you and your spouse and your family. And whether it's travel or fishing or hiking or charity or construction or whatever it may be, that's what it comes along with. If you get one of those things at the cost of the other, then I think that you're leaving a lot to be desired in the highest and best use of our time here on earth. Like, we're here for a blink of an eye. And the idea is that in a beautiful world, the idea is to get to a point where we can enjoy that time by having also location and financial independence, right? So I had to I didn't tear that portfolio down, but I made a hard pivot and I said, okay, I did this wrong. Who is doing this right? So I looked around, and the older, more successful real estate investors that I knew that had the time to go to Europe for a couple months or take the salmon fishing trip or whatever, right? Those men and women, what were they doing? And in the community that I interviewed, ultimately it came down to 3 things, and that was hard money lending, mobile home parks, and self storage. Well, I didn't have a couple $1 million to get started in a meaningful way with hard money lending. I was already a little bit burned on tenants because of the short term rentals. So I had no interest in mobile home parks, and that left storage. And that sounded very appealing to me because you're renting someone a box of air. There's no kitchen, there's no bathroom, there's nothing. It's a box of air. What they do with it is up to them. So I started my pursuit of self storage. And in that process, I met my existing partners, Eric and Levi Hemingway, are the partners that I work with Nomad Capital. And they had a very unique strategy that they were looking to get back into in a big way. And it slapped me in the face because it was what I've already been doing. And I love what you said earlier about talking about real estate educators and helping people with real estate education in general. Because what I'm currently doing when we're sitting at $150 million in assets under management in our current portfolio of self storage is the exact same thing that I was doing with duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, converting them to short term rentals.
Yeah.
We buy nasty, vacant, old big box retail buildings. My partners and I together as a joint venture in 2020, we bought an old Kmart building for 1.5 million. There's very little appetite for a 97,000 square foot Kmart building.
Right.
All across America, these little communities used to drive to these buildings to buy their home goods, right? So the residential density is great, the visibility, the traffic count. But Amazon and Walmart have destroyed that space. But even though those people don't drive to that community for their home goods, it makes it a very good location for those same people to drive back to the same building and pay us to put the same stuff right back inside of it. So we bought a building for 1.5 million. We put 2.5 million into it to convert it into a climate controlled self-storage facility. We put a drive-through aisle where you can drive right through the middle of the Kmart. And as a completed facility, it appraised for 9.1. And I was like, oh, this is real money. So from there, we did another Kmart, 3 warehouses, 2 textile mills, a grocery store, a bottling facility. We can take an old building, we can convert it into a climate controlled self-storage facility for about half the cost of ground up construction and in about a third of the time. So it takes us typically 12 to 15 months from the time we buy a building to opening it up versus 3+ years by the time you buy the land, do the entitlement, the permitting, the engineering, the development, and everything else. So new construction, if you and I went and built a self-storage, would cost us around $120 a square foot for the construction, plus the cost of the land. across all those properties I just told you about, our average is just under $65 a square foot for the purchase of the land, the construction, the conversion, the parking lot, everything. So
This
as
is
a
great.
Class A climate controlled self-storage. So
But I want to dig into this a little bit because this is pretty unique. Now we're a hard money lender, and we've fund you know repurposing of commercial assets sometimes, and we've seen those big box and get chopped up into smaller bays, let's call it, and utilized that way. But I haven't seen anyone convert something like that into self storage, with one exception. I have a good friend buying shopping malls, and he
mhm.
converts a section of that to storage. But so, walk me through the process working with the city, because I know sometimes that could be a bit of a hiccup.
Yeah, big time. Right. So the location is obviously the most important part. Let's zoom out a little bit. I'll walk through that step as part of
That'd be
the whole
great.
picture. So we're looking at 50 to 70 properties a week to get down to 1 to 3 that look like they're going to be decent enough to do decent underwriting on. And then we'll send out maybe 1 or 2 letters of intent per month. So it's hundreds of properties. And our footprint is Southeast, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia. So, the number one thing is residential density. What's the market look like? You know, we do an in-house and third-party feasibility study. We want it to be an underserved market that's having lots of growth, but we're looking at everything from the number of people living around there, the percentage of renters versus owners. Renters are going to use a lot more storage. Number of people per household, average age, median income. Make sure not too many people work for one company that could shut down and run everybody out of town. We look at the zoning department to see which permits for storage are on the way, the price per square foot for other storage in the area, if they're on a wait list, all the things, right? So that's just kind of telling us about the market. Within the location itself, a lot of times it's already zoned appropriately for storage. Depends. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. If it's part of a strip mall, it's like the anchor grocery store of a strip mall. Sometimes the HOA might say you can't do storage in that building because they want something that's going to drive traffic, right? Like a grocery store, they want
Right. Yeah.
people in there.
Exactly.
So in that situation, either it doesn't work or you can go buy the entire development because the anchor store typically is in control of the HOA. So you could buy the whole thing, change the HOA, put storage in, and then out parcel the other buildings if you wanted to. Um, Typically, we've had one exception. I'm from Lexington, South Carolina. We had one exception where in my hometown, the old Kmart that my best friend's dad used to manage, I drove by it every day on the way to high school. We were in discussions to go under contract on that property, been empty for years. And the town, my hometown, decided they had enough storage and you could only do self storage in areas zoned industrial. With the exception of my hometown and that property, which we did not continue with, uh, every other town that we have talked to is just ready for someone to do something with the old so and so, the old Piggly Wiggly, the old Sundrop bottling facility, the old textile mill, the old Kmart. It's been empty for 8, 10, 12, 16 years. We picked up a Piggly Wiggly grocery store in Macon, Georgia that had been for sale for 10 years. There was a tribe of meth addicts living inside the building. There's a giant hole in the roof from a tornado dropping an AC unit through it. Like,
Wow.
if you think about this, if you're flipping a house, you don't make your money when you sell the house. You didn't make your money when you renovated the house. You made your money when it smelled like dogs and cats and you bought it for dirt cheap. That's what we want. We want the dog and cat property. So by the time they get to the point where we're paying less than $20 a square foot for them, 20, $25 a square foot, the town is usually so ready for somebody to do something with it that they're very complimentary and helpful. By the time a deal gets in front of our investors, we've already talked to the town. We've built a relationship. We've done the phase 1, the phase 2 if needed, the mitigation study, all of that. It's complicated and
So
there's a
is this
lot
like,
to it.
I don't, I want to use the word cookie cutter, but that's probably unfair. But is it the same basic model for every center you buy? I mean, you mentioned the drive through. Is it sort of the same concept you're going for each time?
I don't think you're wrong with cookie cutter. I will unpack that a little bit, and I would say this: the drive-through. I'll just tell it to you this way: we did it once.
Okay, it tells me
The
what I need to know.
reality is we spent 300 grand to put
Sounds
in
cool though.
it is cool, but we put in the ventilation shafts so you can drive through the building, and not have to worry about the fumes. And our thinking was, man, you can drive right up to these units. This is going to rent out like hotcakes. The reality is that those units that you can drive up to are the more expensive units. So the ones that rented first were still the farthest
That's
units
funny.
away
That's
because
hilarious.
people went for the cheaper units.
Yeah.
I would also say this. I think that there's a chance that that first property was in Reidsville, North Carolina. Lovely place. Um, I think in a different, more sophisticated market, maybe it would be better received. There's certainly a level of education with comes from a drive-through Kmart self-storage facility when there's never been anything like that around. So maybe over time it would catch on more. But the outlay of 300 grand to turn it into a drive-through when the reality is those are the last units that rented. And if you just take that same square footage and converted it to net rentable storage, it would have increased the value of the property by $1 million. So juice was not worth the squeeze. That was a hard lesson, but it was still the property still doing great. I mean, the underwriting stood and it was fine, but we did that once. Outside of that, I would say yes. You're mostly correct when you say it's cookie cutter because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. We're taking an empty shell, we're putting LED lighting, make sure the sprinklers are good, we make sure it's nice, clean, and beautiful, and then we fill it with roll-up door storage units. That having been said, some of these buildings are 100 years old, and anything, even when you're just doing lights, sprinklers, building an office in, touchscreen kiosks, QR codes, those kind of things, like it's not rocket science. That having been said, when it's 100,000 square
It's
feet,
a lot.
it's a lot. And if you find one little thing, asbestos, lead,
Meth.
anything like that, like, yeah, exactly. Like massive repercussions on something that scale. If it costs you an extra dime per square foot, like holy smokes, it starts to add up really, really quickly. So thin margin of error. And I would say this, what we're doing is not that new. In fact, there's other people doing it. The reason it works for us, full vertical integration. We have an acquisition team constantly looking for off market property. So we don't pay retail costs for the building. I raise the capital from our private pool for investors. So we're not paying for hard or private money. We do the construction in house at cost plus 12%. My partners are a father and son team with 30 years of commercial construction experience. We only work on our projects. So if we have a change order or something like that, we can pivot on a dime and do whatever we need to knock it out because this is all we do. And then we have in-house property and asset management at 5% because my partner built his first self-storage in 2006. We got 12 facilities under our management, including the ones that he personally owns, and then the ones we've done as syndication. So we don't pay retail costs for the building, the capital, the construction, or the management. If you're just out there trying to buy a building and hiring a contractor to do the work and hire a third-party manager, frankly, the juice is not worth the squeeze because you got millions of outlay for a pretty thin margin. And right now, especially years of carrying costs on the interest. Like the average self-storage facility break-even point is typically 60 to 65% occupancy. Ours is 40% because of the low cost basis, but still, we buy the building, takes us a year to 15 months to build it out and 12 to 18 months to fill it up. You still have to make interest payments during that time period. So the amount of money that you have to put out plus the amount that you have to have in capital reserves makes it so it's really not worth it unless you are the builder.
So you have some patient investors.
We do. Yeah, very patient investors. But there's a back end to this that we haven't talked about yet. On average, when we stabilize a facility, like right now our deals look like we'll buy a building for 1.5 to 2.5 million. We'll put 2 to 3 million into it. So we'll be into the building for 4 to 5 million. Our facilities, depending on which market they're in, typically appraise for 13 to 17 million as a stabilized facility, which means at stabilization, we're sitting at 35 to 38% loan to value, which means we don't have to sell our assets for everybody to get a payday. We'll do a cash out refinance.
Yeah.
We'll refinance to 55, maybe 60% loan to value. We don't want to stress the asset, make sure it continues to cash flow. That gives us more than enough money to pay out all of our investors' money. When we pay everyone out, we give a return of capital plus a big chunk on top. When it comes by way of refinance, it's not a capital gain because we didn't sell anything. Our goal is to try to double our investors' money in 5 years or less, tax-free, because it's a refi. Then everybody stays in. We don't cap our investors' returns and we don't push them out of the deal. Everybody stays in, we hold it long-term, and it turns into an unlimited return. So if we've doubled their money, we think there's a real good chance, in what we've seen so far, those investors are likely going to invest with us in another deal, another fund, another offering, especially if their equity in the first one continues to cash flow with an unlimited return. That's the reason the group is called Nomad Capital. Same thing I mentioned to you about independence of purpose. Um, my partner, Eric Hemingway, was building houses in Arizona and built his first self storage facility in 2006. In 2008, the market crashed. Nobody was building anything. So my partner Eric, his wife Rachel, and their 5 children bought a catamaran in Greece, sight unseen, 36-foot boat, flew over there, got on the boat, sailed for 6 months, found out they were pregnant with their 6th kid, stopped in Jerusalem, had their 6th child, had to make sure he didn't get Israeli citizenship because it comes with 2 years of military service, and kept sailing for a total of 3.5 years, and then sailed back across the Atlantic, landed in Wilmington, where we are here, got back to work and started building again. That trip created this idea of the ability to have a nomadic life experience paid for by a portfolio of commercial real estate that you can manage remotely. That's the idea that eventually led to Nomad Capital, because a nomad is somebody that goes where they want, when they want, and does what they want. If we're buying assets, we fix them up and we make them nice, and then we sell them for everybody to get a payday. That's great, and not knocking anyone's strategy. But at the end of the day, we're a glorified house flipper and we're trading time for money. And if you're trading time for money, that means eventually the day you stop working is the day that you stop getting paid. If you want to break that cycle of trading time for money, you have to have some strategy that has enough of a forced appreciation that you can recapitalize by way of refinance, which makes it non-taxable, keep the assets, allow it to continue to cash flow, leave the investors in the deal. Our goal, we're at 150 million in assets under management right now. We've never sold anything. I'm sure we will probably sell something at some point in time. But as it stands right now, we've never sold anything. Our goal is to get to 500 million in 5 years and a billion in 10. The only way we do that, take care of the investors first, keep our fees low, open, honest, and transparent about what we're doing, and do the best we can to double everybody's money tax-free in 5 years or less. If we do that, we think there's a real good chance that those investors will continue to invest with us and we'll continue to scale and hit our goal.
I think you're right. I think that's possible. So you're doing a lot to help investors, Clint. You just went over it. You're helping your private or your passive investors. You're helping active investors with your management company, and you have a podcast. So tell me a little bit about the podcast.
The podcast is something that I started with a co-host. I'm not very good at it. He is. His name's Neil Henderson. Neil's good at it. The podcast is called Truly Passive Income for those that want to listen. And if you don't, it's okay with me. You're not going to hurt my feelings, because the reason I started it is because I get like, this gives me an opportunity to talk with you, and I'm doing too much talking and not enough listening here. So I'm excited to hopefully get you on the podcast and we can turn that around and give me a chance to learn a little bit about your story. But the magic of a podcast is that I can find 52 of the smartest people a year. And otherwise, they would probably never be willing to sit down with me and have coffee or have lunch with me. But because I have a platform and they have something that they want to share, and the beauty of real estate investors is that we all want to talk about real estate investing, they're willing to sit down and give me 45 minutes to an hour of their condensed life experience in a way that they probably would not do that if it was just me listening. And I think that it creates a situation where you become a lightning rod for intelligent people. All of our jobs should be to put ourselves in the room where we're the dumbest person in the room, which is not hard to do for me. Because of that, I co-host a podcast because it's an educational platform for me. I'm a sponge. I host a monthly meetup in town called the Alternative Investing Mastermind. It's on the second Thursday of every month, which is tonight, the day that we're recording this. So I'm leaving here and going to that. First of all, I'm a huge extrovert, but outside of that, I believe that who I was 10 years ago is the same person I am now. It's the same person I'm going to be 10 years from now, with the exception of the places I go, the people I meet, the content I consume, and the books that I read. So that outside perspective changes who we are. And hopefully, if we have good character, we're that same influence on other people. And yeah, real estate is dollars and cents in places, but it's not. It's people. It's about relationships. That's the most important thing. And for someone that that talks so much about money and focuses on money, I don't know whether people believe me when I say this or not, but the reality is I don't really care that much about money. My goal in life is to die with a big stack of pictures of things that I did in beautiful places with beautiful people that I love. Right? We're here for a nanosecond on the earth. So like to me, it's about experiences. And that's one of the things I love about real estate and having a podcast and being on other podcasts is it becomes an opportunity for me to learn and connect um, and get ideas from other people of the beautiful places I want to go and the things I want to do.
This is amazing. Like, I'm really enjoying hearing what you have to say. And you say, I'm not the smartest. It's easy not to be the smartest one in the room. And that's funny. But dude, you're pretty smart. Like, what you're saying here is like pretty deep. And I could not agree with you more. I do this podcast for this exact reason. Like, do I get people that want to work with me because of it? Yes. Do I get people saying thank you? I'm making a difference in their life? Yes. And I get to meet people like you. So die
Yeah,
with
and
pictures, dude. That's
ex-
awesome.
expound on that a little. Like, let me say this. Like, I first of all, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for saying that. The reality is, whatever just came out of me probably would have sounded a lot different a couple years ago because the people I've had an opportunity to connect
Yeah,
with
I would.
have had an impact on me. So it's a reflection on them, right? So that there's a sense of gratitude that I carry that has come from that ability to network and talk with people like you that I want to carry forward. And to me, that's an important feeling to wake up with.
Well, I was going to ask because a lot of the listeners to this podcast are kind of getting started, or they want real estate investors as clients. But let's look at the investors that are kind of getting started. I was going to ask you, Clint, what would you attribute your success, your very fast success? I know you said it felt like a long time, but it was pretty condensed, right? And you're doing very well. So, what would you attribute that to? And I'm not trying to lead the witness here, but you kind of went into it with the education and understanding that it's a people and a relationship business. But like, maybe I shouldn't have just led you there. But tell me honestly what you think you could attribute your success to.
Yeah, I would have gone there anyway. First of all, the number one thing is see. Remember, I was in medical sales, so I left cardiology in 2022. By then, we had done more than half a dozen self storage deals. It had a very meaningful financial impact on our life, and we were off down the rabbit hole. That's what we're doing. So I left medical sales behind. Well, when I was doing that, I had a lot of windshield time, and a lot of the windshield time was spent educating, listening to podcasts, and then I think that we live. This is going to sound like a okay boomer kind of thing to say. Like maybe it's an older guy way to think about things, but I think we have greater opportunity right now in the world to have success than anyone has ever had. Like I grew up, I got my first cell phone when I was in, senior in high school. It was the Nokia brick phone, and for the generation that kind of didn't have that and then did have it, there is so much opportunity right now to network and connect. But more importantly, I think there's opportunity now to have a data driven approach to your decision making process. And you don't have to use your experience and wins and losses to figure out what comes next. You can learn from other people's. So, from a story standpoint, I think that podcasts are there. But from a data analysis standpoint, in terms of like, you don't have to speculate, is this property going to do good as a Airbnb? The data is available for you to run a rentalizer report and work backwards to the net to owner and calculate it in a way that you never could do that before. So I think right now, and it's easy for people to be like, oh, there's so much noise out there. So many people are doing it. It's so competitive. I still believe there is more and greater opportunity right now than there ever has been in the history of the world for people to have success, especially in real estate investing or starting a business. And personally, it's going to sound a little pointed, but like, if you're not if this generation is not doing something to have a meaningful effect on the generational wealth and trajectory of your family, then it's a you problem. Because I think that you don't have to be the smartest guy, but the education is there, the ability to network is there, and the ability to use a data driven approach to pick whatever your asset class is that you're going to go after We bought our first duplex. That was all the money we had. It paid for itself and about $1,400 a month on top of that. But I didn't have any money to go buy another property. So I figured out something. Now I know it's called rental arbitrage. I didn't know that at the time, but I cold called and found a quadplex a block off the beach with horrible tenants in there. I got the owner to get the tenants out, renovate the property, give me a master lease on all 4 properties. We increased the rent. I operated as a short-term rental. I took out an interest-free credit card to pay for the furniture. He deferred the rent for 3 months. At the end of 2 months, I'd paid off the furniture and caught up on the rent. I did $125,000 that first summer in rents across those units. I paid him a fraction of it. I mean, a nice chunk, but my net was 54, and I didn't have any money. And so that money, we took that to buy another quadplex, then another quadplex, then went back to buy that first quadplex. And all of that came from listening to podcast, running rental analysis on our market, looking up nasty properties on the tax records, and paying $4.99 to whitepages.com to have a membership that I could look up phone numbers and calling people. And that situation worked out for me. I probably had 150 situations like that didn't work out, but it's just an investment of time, right? And just getting doors slammed in your face. So no matter what your strategy is, I think we have more opportunity now than ever. Education, what you said, networking with people. And then one thing I will say, I think you can tell by now I'm long-winded and I talk too much, but I will say this. The lessons in real estate are so fundamental. What I was doing with duplexes and with quadplexes is the exact same as buying an old Kmart, converting it to a different asset class. When you convert a piece of real estate from one asset class to another, you change the formula by which it is valued. You change it to something else, you break it up into more units, or you increase the rents, and there's this massive value add. What I was doing with a quadplex is the same thing I'm doing with a Kmart, converting it to 700 units. It's just a few more zeros. And it's really just that simple. If you learn the lessons early, sometimes it's better that way because you're going to make mistakes, and they're cheaper mistakes when it's single family homes or small multifamily. When you take it to the next level, it's the same thing. And it's the same lessons you learn from podcasts or networking or going to your local real estate meetups and supporting those. It's all the same. You just, how far you take it depends on what goal you set for your life, and work backwards from there to determine what your velocity needs to be for you to hit it.
This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com. So I'm going to ask you a very selfish question here. You said you're an extrovert, and that is obvious as I'm talking to you here. I am not. I am absolutely an introvert. I know a lot of introverts out there struggle with what you're saying, and working with people and networking and trying to build those relationships. What piece of advice from an extrovert to an introvert would you give?
First of all, I think that what you have to say probably matters more because it's likely that you're saying less of it than I am. So I think that there's a good possibility that that it carries weight, right? That a lot of times I'm speaking because I like the people in the room to feel welcomed and for people to be laughing and having a good time. Being introverted or extroverted has nothing to do with how cordial you are or how social you are or anything else. It's more about a transfer of energy. Do I get energy by being around groups of people, or do I feel like I'm putting energy out there? And I think that the best thing is, the number one thing is self-inventory, right? What do I have to offer to other people? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What are my goals? And what is my timeline? And if you ask yourself Any question about like, what is my goal? What is the asset class I want to go after? Who do I need to connect with and learn to have success? If the answers to any of those things is I don't know, that's okay. Because I don't know implies a lack of education. That's just ambiguity. And a lack of education is something that's free. Like education is free, whether it's YouTube, podcast, or networking, going to conferences, paying for education, whatever it may be. So I think the best thing is everyone has something to offer, even if it's just friendship or opinion or networking or getting together and sharing lessons about what you've learned. We all have something to offer. Your job is to put yourself in a room where you're going to get your needs met to help you accomplish your goals. And you're actively looking to help the people around you have success as well. It doesn't mean you need to be the center of attention or the life of the party or even on the stage. But a small group of people that have the same similar focus and are lifting each other up with an abundance mindset, anyone can have success in that role if you're genuine, ethical, and honestly trying to help people.
I could not have said that better.
Thank you.
All right, we went really quickly over your property management company. Now, I would love to dig in more. We're kind of running short on time here, but is there anything you want to share with us about that? I mean,
It's
I
hard.
know it's a lot of work, man. So, and you got a lot going on. So, how's it going?
It's going great. And I'll tell you why it's going great. I stepped out of the way. I was hands on. I like to be in control. I'm a data driven guy. I like to use that to push things forward. And I'm the sales customer facing side. So as we're meeting property owners and getting them in, and I'm explaining, look, we're running your property the same way that we run my 14. This is the system that we built over the last few years. This is why it works. This is the quantitative numbers. This is all the things, right? Mathematical approach. And that tends to appeal to a lot of people that are investing, that it's an investment, right? Their money going into this is a store of their life energy. They need to know that we feel responsible to make sure that they have success because our name's on it too. We live on an island. It's a very small community. I'm going to see you at the grocery store. We better make sure we're doing this the right way, right? The biggest thing for me, anybody that started a business or been an entrepreneur, you find yourself doing this. I've got a million things to do. How do I do this? And how do I do this? And how we got 40,000 pounds of linens a month in the summer. How do we do this? And how do we do that? And the reality is, I read a book, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, very popular book. I mean, it's not groundbreaking that to throw it out there. Probably everybody has read it. But where I was at that point in my life, it hit me in a very serious way because what I realized, I don't have to know how to do all those little things. I need to know who I have that's a better operator than I am and get out of their way and let them do that. So I had an operating partner. I took a big step back, let him be as fantastic as he is. We had another manager who's begging to take on more of a role. I backed out and let her take over. She is light years a better operator than I am. I can be a good operator when I need to be, but they are great operators. The best thing that I did was get out of the way. And that book helped me understand that there are people better at what I was trying to do than I was. And, the first time I read that book was years ago. And now, at least once a week in a meeting here, we have 4 general partners, 16 employees, a couple of interns, and a couple more headed this way. And at least once a week, we're in some kind of acquisition meeting or underwriting meeting or something. And I say, this is a who, not how situation. Because at the end of the day, I don't have to know how to do everything. I just need to know who we have that would be better at that than I am, that can either do it or find the person that is the who for that.
I got a lot of great takeaways, Clint, out of this 30-ish, 35 minutes together. I want to go through that and I want you to close out here by telling me anything that I might have missed or any last pieces of advice. And then I would love to know how to get a hold of you. So here's what I wrote down in my notes. Financial independence is a shallow goal. That one really did resonate with me. Location, time, and financial independence is what we're really shooting for. Real estate investors with the most success that you've seen in your research, lending, mobile homes, and self-storage. And then your formula, you look at about 50-ish properties to really start considering 3 you might make an offer on one. And I think that's a week, right? So that you might be making
Yeah.
quite a bit more than that. Stop trading time for money. Podcast benefits is meeting other people. Real estate is about the people and the relationships. You don't want to die with money. You want to die with pictures. That one also hit. Learn from other people and tools. It's easier now than it ever has been. See, I wrote a lot of notes here.
You did.
In networking, self inventory, ask yourself good questions. That's how you're going to get over the introvert fears, I guess. Um, you want to be in the right room and you want to actively look to help other people. Read Who, Not How, and know your strengths and get the hell out of the way. How'd I do?
I think you nailed it, man. I'm starting to realize how long-winded I am because I think we could have done this in 3 minutes. Like you just you nailed it.
I gotta tell you, look, this is a lot of notes. This is more notes. I'm not lying to you here, Clint. This is more notes than I've ever taken in an episode. There was just so much that you were saying that really was resonating with me. So I really appreciate your time here. What did I miss? What other final pieces of advice before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I would say a couple things that jump out at me is first of all, everybody's success is going to look differently. And the time, financial, location, independence, and independence of purpose, like that really does look different for everybody. So don't let anybody tell you what that looks like for you. It's your job to figure out what that looks like for you. And I think that will help you work backwards to where you are and see what strategic decisions you might need to make in your life. As someone who spent 16 years implanting pacemakers and defibrillators, at one point in time, I had a fear that that would probably be all I ever did because that job has a fairly high ceiling. And so I was worried that it's just enough money to make me never risk it and go test my metal and do something else on my own and kind of be stuck there with the golden handcuffs that I think a lot of people feel these days is that like you make enough, you get stuck into the lifestyle and you don't ever have the courage to break out of that into the unknown. And I would say this, what what happened for me, first of all, I don't think it's fairly common knowledge that I don't think many people have heard someone say on their deathbed, man, I wish I played it a little bit more conservatively. I wish I'd been a little bit more safe. So there's that. That's a little flippant and a little bit of a Reader's Digest quote. And that I don't mean to make light of that, but the reality is like, we're all here. We're all going to not be here. In 100 years, we're all gone. 100 years after that, probably someone has said all of our last names for the last time, right? Like that's it. And so the reality is like, we're here for a short period of time. We should make the most of it. And what I would say is, no matter how high the ceiling is on what you're doing, if what you're doing is trading time for money, there is a ceiling because you only have so much time that you can trade. Your job, the way that I felt, my job was to calculate what that ceiling was. There's going to be a maximum of what that ceiling is. And if that ceiling was not enough for me and my family and my life of what I wanted to accomplish with my time here on earth, then the only real risk is not doing something different and staying there in a very comfortable position is the biggest risk I ever could have taken if I know that that ceiling is not enough for what I want to accomplish in my life.
So not taking the action is the real risk. I talk about that a lot.
Do you? Man, I'm so
I
glad to
agree.
hear it. A lot of people don't. And I just feel like that's, the older we get, time is worth more and more and more, right? As a young man, it's not worth that much. The older you get, your time becomes worth more than anything else. So trading it for money just becomes silly at
You
some
know,
point.
all the, I mean, you're a smart guy, so you know this. All decisions are made really two driving forces, right? You're trying to either avoid pain or you're pursuing pleasure. And when you talk about procrastinating or not taking the action, it's basically fear, right? Fear is stopping you. So it's usually fear of maybe failure. And so you're avoiding that pain of failure, right? But all that does is create more pain, right? Because you're not getting ahead. So the sheer decision of trying to avoid pain creates it, right?
It's almost like we're our own worst enemy sometimes. Funny how that works out.
Yeah. All right, man. How do we get a hold of you? How do we work with you? What do we need to do?
Yeah, best way again. I mean, I love to connect with investors all day, every day. Obviously, the best way to reach out to me, I am on Facebook, Clint Harris. I'm on LinkedIn, Clint Harris with Nomad Capital. Best way is just to email me, Clint at nomadcapital.us, or you can go to our website, nomadcapital.us, check out some of our videos and who we are, what we do. The story of Eric and his family on the boat is on there. And yeah, always happy to connect and chat and help anybody any way that I can.
6 kids is a lot, by the way.
Yeah, I've got
So-
2 and it's enough for me. So yeah.
We'll put all those in the show notes here. Clint, once again, thank you so much for this 35, 40 minutes, whatever it is, of your time. I know you're a very, very busy guy, and you decided to jump on here with me, as you talked about, because of the platform maybe. But in any case, I really appreciate your time there. And for the listener, I appreciate your time as well. I know you got some value out of this one. He is fantastic. So please help us out. 5-star review. You have no idea how much that actually helps us. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I wish you guys an amazing day. Thanks again, Clint. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.